Hey guys, today we're going to do a phone mount install and review for phone mounts from A-Tach Mounts in a 2021 Ford F-150. Before I get started, first of all, please ignore the dirtiness of my truck. I live and work out of this truck. And I also need to provide an apology to A-Tach Mounts. They were kind enough to provide me these mounts about a year ago. It's taken that long for me to actually get around to doing this, so I purposely not used these mounts until I was ready to make a video. So apologies, A-Tach Mounts. I ended up doing a move and staying busy throughout this whole time period. As you guys can see, I currently use a magnetic phone mount, but it's a vent mounted magnetic phone mount, which obviously takes away from me getting AC out of that vent. And you may or may not see my phone slowly tilt down during the process of use. So obviously this is not the best solution. So I was looking for a better solution for a phone mount and came across A-Tach Mounts options, but they have two for the F-150. They have a mount option up here on the upper trim bezel, and then they have a mount option down here on the center trim bezel. And I really wasn't sure which one I would like, so I contacted the company and asked them if they'd be willing to send out both. And bless their hearts, they gladly sent both out, and I promised to do a install and review video, so that's where we're at. Okay, so let's see what A-Tach Mounts sent. So first they sent part number 50270, which is our upper bezel mount. And along with it, they sent a part number 10801 magnetic phone holder, since my phone uses a magnetic mount. Then they also sent me part number 50271, which is the middle bezel phone mount for me to try. And bless their hearts, they sent me a second magnetic phone holder to go with that one. Okay, so we're going to start with the upper trim bezel mount, which is part number 50270. As you can see, the phone mount is made out of a ABS plastic material. You can see the two whatever they call these jaws that they utilize to attach around the bezel, and it comes with a little mounting tool to help open up the space on the bezel. As far as the magnetic phone holder, you can see you get a good looking magnetic phone holder. You get a round and a rectangular steel plate if you need it, and then you get the screws necessary to do the job, to attach this to this. So let's start mounting this thing. Now they do have a piece of double-sided adhesive down here. I am not going to use this right now because I may decide to move this phone holder around. So I'm just going to start testing it out right now. So their instructions are to find the space underneath the bezel and put the bottom piece in, and then you can take that same tool and open up the space at the top of the bezel and push on the top of the mount until it clicks in, like that. And now I've got it mounted, and of course obviously I could move this around to wherever I want around this top bezel. And then we're going to take the supplied screws and we're going to screw that in, and we'll see how it looks. All right guys, so this is what the upper trim bezel mount looks like installed. Initial impressions, pretty easy to put together, pretty easy to install. So now we will stick my phone on there. I've actually got to use an adapter plate because I've got a specialized phone mount that I currently use, as you can see. So here's with the adapter plate on. Pretty decent magnetic contact there. Little leery, we'll see how it holds up. Right now the mount seems a little loose, but we'll see. I'll take it for a test drive and see how it goes and if it actually holds the phone up in that position. It does block the screen for me a little bit in the vertical position, which is the way I typically keep my phone. So of course, obviously with a magnet mount, you could put it into a horizontal position. That doesn't block my phone, but it does block my view of my buttons on the dash up here. So, you know, a few pros and cons. But yeah, so that's the upper dash mount. Very simple to install. All right, guys. So now we're going to move on to the middle bezel mount, which is 50271. One of the concerns I had when I was looking at the upper bezel mount, which I was really relieved to see, is if you look closely, since I need to use 4 screws to mount the magnetic mount to this base, I was relieved to see that there are 4 holes already drilled into the mount itself, which perfectly line up with the magnetic phone holder. So they've already made this very easy to assemble. So again, like before, they give you a little pry tool, and you are supposed to pry open the bottom of this bezel and get the bottom in. Or I could be wrong. Maybe it's the top first. Clearly I haven't read the instructions, which they do supply in these. And then it was the top first, and then the bottom, and you're supposed to push or flex this bottom piece down, and it just pops right in like that. And again, like the upper mount, this thing, I'm not using the double-sided adhesive because it is designed to move along the entire length of this bezel trim, so I can decide where I like it. Or if I decide not to use this one, then maybe my passenger can use it as well. So I'm going to pause the video here so that I can attach the magnet mount to this, and then we'll be back. Okay guys, so here is part number 50271 mounted on the middle trim bezel. Again, very easy to assemble together and mount on the trim bezel following the instructions. My phone, previously I used a adapter plate to mount it on the upper mount, and while it was a pretty good magnetic stick, I wasn't really sure how really sturdy and stable it would be. What I discovered though is if I just use my actual charging mount, because that's what this is a wireless charger base, it's actually a much more secure connection, and then I can finally have my vent back. So as you can see, really good strong connection there magnetically, and then I just stick my phone on there and bam, fully charged. So initial thoughts, I like that it's not up in my viewing area by having it down here, and it's still in a good line of sight for me as I'm driving, but it is blocking some part of the screen, some portion of the screen for me in this current spot, and it's also blocking my temperature controls somewhat. So I suppose I could rotate this into landscape mode. I lose view of this area up here, but I can at least see my temperature controls and buttons here, and I can see my screen. So that was my dilemma, is whether I would want something mounted down here or something mounted up here and still have my vent, because it is really hot. I think the last time I turned my screen on, the truck was reading 106 degrees inside the truck. So I definitely want my vents. So yeah, so I think the next thing I'll do is take this for a drive, see how these mounts hold up, and give you guys my final impressions. See you in a bit. All right, so just came back from driving around, testing out these mounts. Give you my thoughts on these. First, starting with the install. The install is fast and simple for either one of these mounts. Should take you no more than about 2 minutes max to get these 4 screws in, and then mount your holder to either bezel. I thought both of them were fine and sturdy. We even tried to test on a bumpy gravel road, and they both handled well. The magnet is definitely strong enough. No problems with the magnet strength whatsoever. I think my only issue might be the top mount. While it doesn't happen while you're on the road or anything, the top mount does not necessarily lock into place very well. So I'm a little iffy on that top mount bracket. It didn't move out of place though, so I'll give it props for that. I just don't like how I can pop it out so easily like that. I think I'm also not a fan of that location. Part of the whole point of this was to test both locations to see which one I like better. I did end up moving this mount almost as far to the left as possible here on this middle bezel. And that way, when I put my phone here, I can see my phone without blocking my view of the screen. I can still access my drive modes underneath the phone. I just can't access my Pro Trailer or my brakes with the phone sitting there, my brake controller, excuse me. But those things I'm only going to use if I'm actually hauling a trailer. So minor inconvenience, I think they're in an effort to get my vent back. So the only other topic I wanted to talk about were these screws. So the screws provided, and I'll try and show it to you in an inset on the video, does stick out a little bit past this base. It works just fine on this one because it's just going out into open air. But when I installed on this upper one, where the screw actually goes through the base mount into the holder, the bracket, that bracket is glued on to this front face. And so as I was setting those screws in, I could hear popping sounds, which sounded like the glue separating. And my guess would be that that would have been the tip of the screws clearing past the bottom of this base and going into the glue. So it is something to be a little concerned with. Don't know if that weakened that glue joint at all. This one does not have that issue. That's my only other thoughts. Beyond that, first, I would like to say thank you very much to A-Tach for both of these mounts. I think they're both designed well. I think you can't go wrong with either one. It's a lot of personal preference involved here. I'm not crazy about having a mount sticking up here in plain view, and I'm also not crazy about driving around with a phone taking up my view, so I probably will remove this from the dash and just rely on this lower one. Obviously, I use an Android phone, Android Auto, so most anything I do is shown on the screen anyways. But there are times where I do need to access the phone, and I find that down here is a very easy location for me to manipulate. Beyond that, like I say, you can't go wrong with either one, so enjoy. Thank you very much again, A-Tach.